What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham G. Matthews, break down all the original content you watch on the WWE Network and on Peacock. And today we're talking the January 15th, 2024 edition of Raw Talk. Megan Morant, Matt Camp in the studio, running down the biggest headlines from Monday's show, including recapping the Candice LeRae and Indy Hartwell tag team win over Chelsea Green and Piper Niven. We hear from Hartwell and LeRae backstage afterward with, I think, Jackie Redmond or Byron, I forgot who. But Indy says that they're on their way to becoming tag team champions, and they're well on their way. And they kind of emphasize the way part because they're part of the way, pun intended. They pinned former champions on Monday's Raw in Chelsea and Piper. Then we hear from Zoe and Shayna, who interrupt them and say their road must go through them. They won their match on Raw as well, beating Natalya and Tegan Nox. So probably setting up a future match between those two teams. They hype up the Katana Chance and Kaden Carter WWE Women's Tag Team title defense for Friday's SmackDown against Alba Fire and Isla Dawn. Again, like I said on the SmackDown Lowdown a few days ago, doing absolutely nothing to earn that opportunity, but whatever. They recap the Judgment Day win, Finn Balor and Damian Priest over The Miz and R-Truth. They also recap the Judgment Day loss to DIY, Dominic Mysterio and JD McDonough. Matt Camp recalls the Becky Lynch, Rhea Ripley October face-off on Raw when they kind of initially planted the seeds for a future matchup between the two. They actually first crossed paths. I mean, they had a match on NXT almost 4 or 5 years ago, but they had a match or a face-off backstage about a year and a half ago on Raw, back in October. And maybe this is what he was talking about. He was probably talking about this past October. And he was, because he mentioned that Rhea was the Women's World Champion, Becky was the NXT Champion. They did cross paths before that, back at Survivor Series 2022. That's going back a while, so I'm not surprised he didn't mention that. But they planted the seeds for a future match between them even then. So these two have been kind of two ships passing in the night for a while. It certainly seems like coming off that segment on Raw, and we've been assuming this for a while now, that Becky and Rhea is the match for Mania, come WrestleMania 40 in a couple of months. And he also says that Becky feels that she needs to prove herself. She said this in her face-off with Rhea on Monday's Raw. She needs to prove herself by taking on Rhea in that match, that Becky needs to face Rhea to prove that she can still beat her and be better than her to become the Women's World Champion. They hype up Drew McIntyre versus Damian Priest for next week's Raw, as well as recap the Akira Tozawa win over Ivar on Raw this week. Yes, he did pick up a shock win over Ivar, Tozawa's one televised win of the year, his annual televised victory. We hear from Ivy Nile backstage. She says that she's facing Valhalla next week. She talked to Adam Pearce, had the match made official, and she says that Valhalla is going to pay for what she did to Maxine on Monday this past week. They hype up Nile versus Valhalla for Monday's Raw next week, as well as Chad Gable versus Ivar one-on-one. They recap the Akira Tozawa, or rather the Xavier Woods match with Ludwig Kaiser from Raw this week, and the match ending in a DQ win for Kaiser. We hear from Ludwig Kaiser. Giovanni Vinci, by the way, is still out with the concussion stuff. He said that he's fine 2 weeks ago, which is good. They're just keeping him out of precaution, which is nice. So it's just Kaiser, not really flying solo. We had Gunther back on Raw this week with Kaiser, but Kaiser's kind of doing his own thing, feeding with New Day, which is cool. But anyway, he says that Gunther knows that he can step up when necessary, that being Kaiser. And then he was the last man standing on Monday night. He also warns Woods to keep his head on a swivel, so setting up a future rematch between the two on Raw. They recap the World Heavyweight Championship main event with Seth Rollins beating Jinder Mahal, thank fucking God. Jackie Redmond questions who's next for Rollins following his latest victory. And Matt Camp says that Rollins currently does not have a match set for the Royal Rumble. I'd be surprised if they didn't add a match, but at the same time, they already have 2 title matches from SmackDown, the 2 Rumbles themselves. They don't really need Rollins in the card. I definitely do not want him to run it back with Mahal. If they set up Bronson Reed last minute, that'd be fine, but at this point, you can probably just save that for Elimination Chamber. And Rollins might be hurt anyway. Apparently, he was legitimately hurt during Monday's Raw, so he might not even be at the Rumble regardless, which might work out well so he can kind of rest and recover, heading into Elimination Chamber and beyond, heading on the road to WrestleMania, that is. So, Matt Camp mentions that Rollins might be watching the Rumble closely to kind of see who comes out of that match victorious and who he might be facing at WrestleMania. They hype up the CM Punk Cody Rhodes face-off for next week on Raw and plug Carlito and Randy Orton for the bump coming up on Wednesday. Standard edition of Raw Talk per usual, hearing from Ludwig Kaiser, Indy Hartwell, Candice LeRae, and Ivy Nile, setting up several matches for next week's go-home edition of Raw. And just like that, the Royal Rumble's coming up in like a week and a half. It's already here, which is crazy, but I'm excited for it. I'm looking forward to being there as well. Thank you guys for checking out my review of Raw Talk for this week. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.